Good morning. I'm Nobue Mita, representative of Boston Global Forum Japan. I'm very happy to be here today. Now, I'd like to start BGF Japan's first conference. Our topic is how to improve Japan-China relationship. Needless to say, the importance of governments. Governments are very, very important, of course, but the nation is not a single organism. This is because each nation is made up of individuals. I believe that good relations between Japanese and Chinese individuals are very important for two nations. I hope that Japanese and Chinese individuals will help change the two nations' relationship for the better. Today, we have Mr. Fujisaki for the moderator, Mr. Vogel, Mr. Hamada, Mr. Kondo, and Mr. Sasajima. I'm very excited to have such wonderful people here today.
My name is Ichiro Fujisaki. I'm the moderator for the discussion today. I've been ambassador to the United States, and as a retired diplomat, I'm now professor of Sophia University and Keio University, both in Tokyo. Now, I would like to ask panelists to introduce themselves, although none of them needs introduction. Please.
I'm Ezra Vogel. For many years I was a professor at Harvard University, and I have retired from my job but not from work. And I tried to keep up with developments both in Japan and China, and I'm very concerned about what we might do to improve relations between the United States and Japan and China, all three countries.
My name is Koichi Hamada. Good morning. I'm retired from Yale University and an advisor to Prime Minister of Japan now. And I'm very pleased to speak to you from this International House of Japan. That was built by Shigeharu Matsumoto, who intended, with the help of Rockefeller III, Rockefeller III, to cultivate active discussion between intellectuals among US, Japan, and Asian countries.
Mr. Fujisaki, and from the previous, I'm Masahiko Sasajima from the Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper. I was once a page correspondent, and later on I have worked as from Mexico covering the international relations and also Japanese security issues. And also, especially, I'm interested in the U.S., China, Japan triangular relationship. Thank you for inviting me to join this conference. I'm very honored to hear that robust and significant opinions and comments from the other prominent figures. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm Seiichi Kondo. I'm also a retired diplomat. I have been with the government for 42 years, and I have been watching Japan, China, and US during those years. And I'm very concerned about the current situation of Japan-China, Japan-Korea relationship. I was posted in Washington from 92 to 96, and I was Minister for Public Affairs. So I was dealing with American media during the time of Japan-US auto talks, which was a big trade war between Tokyo and Washington. I'm now running a small institute called Tokyo Kondo Institute for Culture and Diplomacy. I'm also teaching at Tokyo University, Toyo University, and Doshisha University in Kyoto. I'm sort of specialized in cultural diplomacy, public diplomacy, and also promotion of traditional Japanese culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And today, as all of you said, the China-Japan relations is a focus of world attention. It had been like that before the World War II, but now, again, people are watching Middle East, Ukraine, and the Far East. There are tensions. Now, there are several ways of looking at Chinese behavior on this issue. One is that China and Japan both wants to improve the relations. They have not come to realize how to do that. However, they are really eager to improve the relations. We have seen some signs of that. For example, President Xi Jinping has met former Prime Minister Fukuda. However, the other's view is that no, that's a little too optimistic view. One, China is really concerned about Japan's new tendency. Prime Minister Abe's policy on collective defense and other issues. Also, China itself wants to establish themselves in the present world arena and need this kind of strong attitude towards others in order to establish the regime, one-party rule, in this difficult situation. That is why they have skirmished with Vietnam, Philippines, and Japan. So it's not as optimistic as the first view. This is, I have to admit, that little too oversimplified to just have a dichotomy of saying, hey, this is one side view, this is the other. But in order to make the discussion clear, I have just presented these two different views. And I want panelists to comment on those views or to present your views that, hey, it's in between or both or whatever, or nothing of that. I think it would, as a sort of starting point, this kind of question could be of use. And any of panelists could come in and comment, please. Ms. Rosal, please.
I think that any country's leader has to show that he is strong and not caving in to opinions of other countries. and that he is not a weak leader. And even in China now, there is considerable public opinion that we must be strong. I think there is a strong feeling among many Chinese that ever since the Opium War, they have been weak and other countries were strong, and they had to give in. And finally, they have the strength now not to give in, and they can show that they are really strong. Another issue is that as commerce expands in the areas around China, in the South China and East China Sea, and people begin to talk of developing resources, a lot of the historical questions about who this belongs to have never been settled. So at the current time, that is becoming a big international issue. And all the countries are beginning to make claims to that area. And there is no easy route to defending and resolving those issues. And in the last 15, 20 years, there are some people who believe that in many countries, to take a strong stand against another is very popular. And in China, the World War II movies where they show Japan as the enemy have been very popular. And while in the 80s, the 1980s, the Chinese were quite willing to be friendlier to Japan. In recent years, with so many movies showing World War II, and with the way the news is handled, the anti-Japanese sentiment has grown quite a bit. My own personal view is that both China and Japan would like to do something to improve it, but they don't want to give in. And Abe-san is now confronted with a situation that Chinese demands are very strong, and yet if he thinks of the future as China gains even more strength and more military, he doesn't want to establish the practice of Japan yielding and giving in to become like Finland was with the Soviet Union. He wants to make a statement that he is strong. So neither side is ready to give in a big way. But I think there is hope that this year with the APEC meetings in November, that there can be at least some modest improvement so that the two countries, China and Japan, could reduce the risk of accident and reduce the risk of conflict and begin to expand the range of contacts so that they can begin to restore some of the confidence that the two countries had in the 1980s.
Thank you very much, Ezra-san. Sasajima-san, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fujizaki. Professor Vogel gave us broader perspectives in terms of the Sino-Japanese relationship. But let me back to the original question of Ambassador Fujizaki. It seems to me that China has sent us some different signals to Japanese so far, and that makes us some confusion in Japan. Seems to me that the problem is that there is a big gap between what they are saying and what they are doing. The deeds and words do not correspond. So that makes Chinese signals gave us some sort of confusion. I think there are three types of signals from the Chinese. Chinese Communist parties so far pursue a different type of the policy goals simultaneously. One is that they may think that it's necessary to maintain a cooperation with neighboring nations, including Japan. So is that one of the official lines of the Chinese diplomacy. And Mr. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs keeps that kind of balance. But on the other hand, Chinese Communist Party also thinks that they need a cohesiveness among their party members beyond their inter-party power struggles. And so they need some, they may think that it's useful to fight against the external enemies. That is, Japan is one of that. And several decades ago, American imperialism was one of them, and also Soviet socialist imperialism was also one of the kind of external enemies. And Central Bureau of Propaganda in the Chinese Communist Party represents that kind of opinion, I think. So they maintain that hardline positions. And also, there is another kind of that sectors. That is the People's Liberation Army and energy and oil sectors. They want to keep that vested interests, and they try to establish a hegemony in East China Sea and South China Sea. Also, they may think that the Western Pacific beyond the Seven Island lines in the future. So this kind of geopolitical approach is one of another approach, I think. So it seems to be there exists a three kind of approach in China, and that makes us a confusion. And it's difficult to solve these 2-3 approaches for us now.
Thank you very much, Sazajima-san. Kondo-san, please.
Okay, I may sound a bit naive, but I'm of the view that both the Chinese leadership and most of the Chinese want to genuinely improve bilateral relations with Japan. But they can't do it because of maybe three things. Nationalism and populism in China. China is getting more and more democratic, and more people say their views through social media. And it seems to me that always nationalistic, very radical views are expressed through those media. So Chinese leadership is very sensitive to the trend of this nationalism. This is one thing. And also there is a deeply rooted resentment to what Ezra said, the humiliated history starting from Opium War and also Sino-Japanese War, Russo-Japanese War, and World War II. The history, 20th century was a history of resentment for the Chinese. Now they think the time to restore honor in the long history of the world. So this sentiment is still deeply rooted in the Chinese mind. So once there are signs of anti-Japanese or anti-West nationalism, it is very difficult to calm it down. And thirdly, these feelings and negative images and opinions are generated by the media. We should not blame media for everything, but media tends to exaggerate negative stories rather than positive ones. Those three things combined, Chinese leadership and Chinese people, most of them are unable to get out of this quagmire. I believe they really want to improve genuinely the relationship, but they can't do it. Once they have fished up, it is very difficult to withdraw. Unilateral withdrawal means weakness, and this will weaken the position of the leadership. And there are oppositions, and there are some ultra-nationalists who will always try to criticize the leadership. So this is the situation. So if there are some circumstances which will allow both leadership, this problem leadership is facing is also the case in Japan. So it is important for us, intellectuals as well as the people, to create a favorable climate in which both leadership can start, withdrawing their fist and discuss constructive restoration of friendly relationship between the two countries.
I want to elaborate on what Kondo-san was just talking about, about the public opinion of both sides. Because I think there is a kind of ping pong between some of the left wing in China and the right wing in Japan. And as you know, the public opinion polls now show very high percentage, something like 90% in each country have a bad image of the other country. And not only the press, but the web media gives people who have those extreme views a chance. And in Japan, of course, they see what the left wing is saying in China, and they become much stronger. And then that makes the left wing even stronger in China. So it's a kind of vicious circle. And since the leaders cannot appear weak, it's not easy to find a solution. And my hope is that you can have very smart leaders on both sides who try to find some way of stepping down. For example, if the Chinese reduce the number of ships and planes, and then the Japanese reduce, and then the Chinese reduce, and gradually, near the Senkaku Yayutai, if you can gradually reduce those ships and planes, then either side has to say that they have been solved. And I think in that situation also, it's important for the leaders to try to avoid provoking and things that can be used or by the other side to inflame opinion, if possible, to avoid those provocations. I think also is very important at this time.
Thank you very much. Having heard three of you, I think there were sort of nuance was different when Sasajima-san was suggesting that there's a geopolitical objective in the Communist Party and PLA and energy sector who needs to expand their influence within the country and using this outside elements, trying to impress the people that they are taking strong attitudes. Now, Ezra-san and Kondo-san were saying that they have to look strong, so they may want to, even if they may want to improve the relations, that's not easy. Now, this is what some Japanese critics are saying. You are saying that it's a ping pong, Ezra-san, that Japanese right wing and Chinese left wings are sort of doing this ping pong. However, this is again, I would underline that this is Japanese way of looking at it. Hey, it's not equal. You said movies and TVs have affected Chinese thinking. In 1980s, many Chinese were more friendly to Japanese, but then this movie and TV has changed the psychology. However, people think that movies and TVs, it's not like in United States or in Japan. It could be sort of instigated by the party or the government. So it was the government's or party's policy to do this. Also in the textbook as well. So it's was it not the policy? That's the first question. Second is here there is a right wing and hate speeches. It is true, especially in the weekly magazines. But this is quite limited, and it's not. You don't see that on television or newspapers that much, and it's a little different. How, again, I would say that this is a Japanese way of looking at it, but how would you comment on that?
I think that after the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, the atmosphere in both sides was quite different because the United States and Japan had almost been allies with China against the Soviet Union in the 1980s. And that created a very different climate. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, then that extra basis for friendship was not there. And it's true that at that time, the Chinese media no longer showed as many friendly pictures of Japan. I remember the Oshin, for example, a television series that showed daily life in the Yamagata family, was very popular in China in the 1980s. And movies like that are not so common now as they were at that time. But in my view, and I may not be objective and I'm not as detailed, the Japanese media also has a kind of anti-Chinese edge. When the Chinese ships go near the Senkaku Diaudao, that gets on television. And when the Chinese throw rocks at a Japanese shop in China, that gets over and over again to the Japanese media. So in that way, I agree with Kondo-san that the media on both sides, in a way, creates the feelings. And even Chinese media now has a bourgeois capitalist principle of trying to sell more things. So I think the media everywhere tends to dramatize those events. So perhaps I think Ambassador Fujisaki is quite right that there is a little difference of opinion about the emphasis in the comments that Sasajima-san and I had. I tend to see more the context more than the purposive effort to unify opinion as important.
Thank you very much. Before I would give a chance for our only media person, Sasajima-san, to make his comment, I would like to ask Hamada-san to.
Whenever I go to a bookshop here, there is some section that gathers manga, comics, and books that are under that tendency, and I deeply regret that's not helping our relationships. But let me say, I am an economist helping the cabinet on economic matters, and so whatever I say about diplomacy or politics is just layman's view as well as non-official view, so completely independent of what the present cabinet is trying to do. I am an economist, so I am naturally optimist. Economic games are non-zero-sum cooperative game, even though you are competing with price and production. This competition will help by the help of invisible hand also to enhance the ties of participating people. On the other hand, political game is often known zero-sum game, and also history, argument, and so forth goes into some assertions that doesn't help compromise or adding to the welfare of participating nations. Moreover, there is always elements of fear that lead the negotiations into some prisoner's dilemma and so on. But when I met Sheila Smith, Council on Foreign Relations, I said I am an economist, so I'll talk about some methodology developed in economics, that is von Neumann's game theory. And she was frightened that nobody in this group will understand game theory. But game theory is not mathematical difficult entity, but social wisdom. When we are in the situation with competition or cooperation and so forth, how people behave. So I would dare to make some usually, as I said, economics needs cooperation, and also that will help. Economic activities will help cooperation. And on the one hand, the peace in the East will help Japanese and other economies. And also, if we keep Abenomics going well, which I think as an insider will do, continue, the Chinese people or Korean people would have to respect the achievement of Japan, and they will have to cooperate anyway, and so forth. So my task is not to talk about politics, but to give good consultations to keep the Abenomics that is fluttering a little bit, but that I hope will do its job because of the very resolution of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Secretary and so forth. But finally, I'd like to add that game is a cooperative game, but the nations are playing games with spectators. They want to negotiate better, or they want to cooperate with the other party, well, to increase the mutual benefits. But at the same time, they have to keep their politics stable. So, Mr. Shinzo Abe, I'm afraid, is also thinking how his statement or his actions will affect Japanese constituencies. And in China, the same thing is going on. They have to keep their political system stable. In order to that, they need probably harder lip talks than needed. And one question which I would like to learn from you is that which is easier? In conventional wisdom, in democracy, you have to take care of the voting, so you have to be active in this propaganda war. So the situation develops, or in socialist countries there is a single authoritative planner, so you don't need to worry about the voters. But I don't know whether it is true in the present China. And I am in generally as an economist optimistic, but the degree of optimism depends on how the politics or campaign in China as well as in Japan are going.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Hamada has touched upon an important point, that is that in democratic country there are voters, and it's not always so easy to use force, but in a one-party rule country, when you have an authoritative government, it's the military or it's the government or the party who can decide to use force on its own geopolitical strategic thinking. I think without really thinking about election of voters. And I think that was one of the important elements here as well. And when I mean here discussions we were having, I think I'd like to ask two questions to Sasajima-san. One is that Ezra-san and Kondo-san were suggesting that they may want, the Chinese leaders and Japanese leader may want to improve the relations. However, they have to look strong to their constituency. So it's not easy that they can really try to get out of this condition and try to improve the relations, because they are the prisoners of this maybe self-imposed conditions. However, you suggest that it's not that, maybe it's not that they want to improve the situation. There are geopolitical reasons that they may think that this is the important opportunity to increase, the Chinese want to increase its influence, power projection. I think that was what you were suggesting, and if you could elaborate. The second point is both Professor Vogel and Mr. Kondo was suggesting that media has a big role in, if I may say, aggravating the situation. No, we're not trying to blame everything on media, they said, but still, the media has played a big role. Do you think that Chinese media, you have been in Beijing, you know the Chinese media, you know the Japanese media, could you try to compare them and try to comment on this media issue? These are the two issues, if you could address.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fujisaki. Both Professor Vogel and Mr. Kondo criticized the media functions, so I feel a little bit isolation here.
We're lucky to have you.
Let me try to respond to the questions of, by Ambassador Fujisaki. First of all, it appears there existed some action and reaction between China and Chinese and Japanese constituencies in a public opinion survey. However, we cannot swallow that kind result of that kind of public opinion survey, I think. Let's back to that after the 1972, after the establishment of the, after the recovery of the Sino-Japanese relationship, it seems to me that deterioration of Japanese negative image against China started just after the Tiananmen Square incident in 1989. After that, a majority of the Japanese people think that some having had that some negative image against China, and that kind of majority level is continuing after 1989. And that, although there exists some ups and downs of that kind of public opinion survey in the Prime Minister's office, however, that kind of deterioration are increasing much more after 2010, just after the collision case of the Chinese fishery boat against the Japanese patrol boat. This is just a recent tendencies. However, if you see that the longer term, that kind of negative image has continued so much. This is the Japanese side part. On the other hand, Chinese side has changed their opinions in their media organization against about the Japanese image has fluctuated in each political cases. And the reason why is that basically simple. Japan is a democratic nation. There are numerous kind of mass media